Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about how to properly measure and put a prong collar on your dog, how to use it. I've got Bane out here today as our demonstrator. So we're going to go through three types of prong collars: large, medium, and small. We'll talk a little bit about their different applications. There's many ways to set up prong collars, but I'm going to show you the main way we recommend it, and we'll go from there. So before we get started on how we're going to measure and apply our prong collar, let's talk about how we would actually use it. My recommendation is, if you're using a prong collar, it should only be for a short period of time. For some dogs in training, most dogs, we don't need to use a prong collar in training, but some dogs might need the use of a prong collar, maybe because a regular fur saver collar that we usually recommend for training is not being effective for whatever reason. We're going to go to a prong collar in that situation for a short period of time. Then we'll be done with the prong collar, go back to the fur saver training collar, and once we get our remote collar condition, we'll be using that as well. So with that being said, we can also use the prong collar for very specific points in specialty training to try and sharpen up some behaviors, but again, it's only going to be used for a short period of time, not a long-term training tool we're going to be using. So there's three main types of prong collars. You've got large, small, and medium-sized prong collars. The main thing is, the difference between them is the size of the prongs themselves. There's a bunch of different types of prong collars out there. I recommend Herm Springer prong collars. All right, you want to make sure that the link up for your prong collar looks like this. All right, we don't like the nylon buckles or clips. Those can easily break. The proper way to put a prong collar on or off your dog is going to actually be taking the links apart like so, putting it around your dog, and then relinking it like so. Okay, if you're not doing it that way, you have a prong collar that's very prone to breaking, especially ones with the nylon clips or buckles. The prong collar to put on and take off, you're going to unclip these links. The good thing about that is, this is how you size it. Okay, the way you size your prong collar is by removing one link at a time until you get to the collar size that's appropriate for your dog, which I'll show you right here. We're going to use the large prong collar first. The reason why you would use a large prong collar in most cases is this is going to actually give less of a correction than a small or medium prong collar. These prongs are bigger, okay? They're actually going to move less than the small or medium prong collar, so this is what we'll usually go to first. The other thing you'll notice about these prongs is they're actually smooth on the tips. The tips are smooth and rounded out. There's no sharp tips, so that's a very important thing. You don't want a prong collar that has sharp tips. If you have one, you probably have an improper prong collar. All right, so when we're putting a prong collar on our dog, again, we're gonna take it apart like so with the links. We're gonna put it around our dog like so, and then relink it like so. Notice how big it is, okay? Ideally, when we're putting this on our dog, the links are sitting right up against the skin like this. So we actually have a lot of space here. So what I'm going to be doing is taking a couple links off of this prong collar to try and resize it. So I'll go ahead and take two links off here, like so. I just take those off, put them in my pocket. On the bottom of the prong collar, you're going to have this little plate, okay? So I usually try to take links off of each side of the plate evenly if I can. So I'll just take two off of this side, see if that's a good fit. Now, some people like to put the plate right on their dog's front of their neck. I don't really care about that too much myself, because I usually will set up the prong collar for the leash to attach to the side of the neck, which I'll show you what I'm talking about here in a second, okay? So I've taken two links off of this side, two links off of the other side. Now let's put it back on, like so. Okay, this is actually a pretty good fit right here, okay? So notice how it's sitting on his neck, okay? Whenever the leash tightens, these prongs will tighten, okay? And that we'll be using the negative reinforcement quadrant with the prong collar, or positive punishment quadrant, okay? So with that being said, a lot of people, they want this plate right here, right along the dog's trachea, like this, like so. I don't really care about that too much, because I will be attaching my leash to this side of his neck, okay? Because he'll be walking on my left side, so the leash will be attached right here. So sometimes I'll angle the prong collar like so that I can attach the leash right here, okay? Now the reason why we always use a fur saver with a prong collar, I'll just attach my leash just like that. The reason why we would keep our fur saver on with the prong collar is sometimes when we're using the prong collar, these links they'll rattle and they'll come apart on their own. And so I'll still have my leash connected to the fur saver in case that emergency situation happens, okay? So that is the large prong collar. That's how we set that up. We'll show you a medium and a small here in a second. All right, so now we have the medium prong collar out, the same setup as before. It's all the same, it's just a smaller prong, smaller collar, okay? So again, in order to put this on the dog, we're gonna actually unclip a link right here, like so. Put it around his neck like so, and then we re-clip it. Again, notice we have a gap here, which means we probably want to take one prong out of this side, one prong out of this side, so let's go ahead and do that. We'll see how it sizes up. Take these extra prongs, put them in my pocket, okay? So now, again, to put it on, I just unclip it, put it around his neck. We're a little bit tight, okay? I can't get it fully clipped without squeezing too much, so I'm gonna add one more link back in. Like so. Put it back around his neck. Boom. Now again, this is a great example. We want to see the prongs just lightly sitting on his neck. We don't want them pressing in. We don't want them hanging off. When it's sitting here, it should just be lightly sitting on his skin, just like so. Again, some people like this little tab right here to be right on the front of the neck. I don't really care about that too much, because my main thing is on this side of his neck is where I'm hooking up the leash. So again, I take the leash and I hook it through the fur saver and the prong collar together. That way, if I'm walking and one of these links just happen to unclip, boom, I've still got my leash attached to him via the fur saver. So now we have the small link prong collar. Notice how small these links are. Again, it's the same collar, this is just colored black. But if we've got the same setup for the leash over here, okay, it's all stainless steel. We've got the same link setup where we unclip the links to put it on the dog's neck and re-clip them. Okay, so same setup. The good thing about the small link prong collar is it can give a little bit more precise of a correction. So we're gonna use the large link most of the times, medium link sometimes, but also the small, very good for very precise corrections with the dog. And you can easily translate that to a fur saver or remote collar later, so you're not using the prong collar as often, okay? So again, to put it on the dog, I unclip it like so, put it around the dog's neck like so. Uh-oh, notice it's too tight, I can't even clip it. So I'm gonna need some extra links here. Got some in my pocket. I always keep a good supply of extra spare links on hand, okay? So I'm just gonna add 2 here. Boom, like that. Okay, then again, we'll put it on his neck like so. Boom, and that's perfect right there. One of these links is a little crooked, there we go. So again, notice that the links are just sitting on his neck. They're not digging in at all. When we're not using it or not pulling on it at all, it should just be sitting there. Okay, that sets it up for prime usage as we get moving here. Okay, again, on this side of the neck, I've got the rings lined up so I can easily attach my leash. He's gonna be walking on my left side, so I have to set up the leash on the right side of his neck. So that's how I do that. The small prong collar is the most likely to come apart when you're using it, when you're walking and things like that. So with that being said, you definitely want to have a secondary collar clipped up to it at the same time, okay? So that's how we're going to put on a small prong collar. The way we take it off is just the reverse. We're just going to unclip it, okay, just like so. So now I'm going to show you guys how we position all the collars that we use on the neck. We're going to be using fur saver, remote collar. Once we get to that point in training, don't forget your remote collar prerequisites have to be completed, and you have to complete remote collar conditioning before you start using a remote collar, all right? And if we're using a prong collar as well, it can be kind of tricky how to line everything up on the neck. What I personally like to do, I'll put the remote collar on above the fur saver, because by the time I'm using the remote collar, the fur saver is just something for me to attach my leash to. Ideally, for me, if I'm still using a prong collar, or if I'm using a prong collar on top of a remote collar, I'll put the prong collar above the remote collar. We want the prong collar up higher on the neck so that we can get that precise leash communication. And then again, over here, I'm going to be attaching the leash to these 2 rings just like so, okay? So that's how I'm gonna set up all 3 collars on the neck. Again, I'm not using the remote collar, or I'm not using the prong collar long term, so I'll eventually not be using that and just have my remote collar and my fur saver collar on the dog. So if we're using a prong collar in our training, you're not going to be pulling really hard on the leash. It's just a very light pull, because don't forget, even to get to this point in training, you should already have completed your engagement. You've already completed your leash pressure work, bane heel. So whenever you get to this point, your correction should be minimal, okay? But let's say, for example, I need to give a correction. I can pull with the leash like so. Notice how he immediately responds to it, and he moves right back to me, okay? So it's just gonna be a very light tug and release of the leash, and that's just gonna help you precise out some things with your dog, okay? So if I stop, I can pull up a little bit to get him to sit. Okay, I can pull down for him to go down, right? Those kind of things, but also your leash pressure has to be done in order for this to work properly. But that's what a leash correction would look like with the prong collar. It's just gonna be a very slight tug and release of your leash, or slight tension of your leash at any point in time. Remember, we have three main types of prong collars. We have large, we have medium, and we have small. We recommend Herm Springer prong collars. Just stay away from prong collars that have sharp prongs. They should be smooth and well-rounded. And also there should be no nylon or plastic clips on your prong collar, because those are prone to breaking, okay? Also remember, attach a fur saver to your leash with your prong collar, just in case your prong collar fails. And your prong collar should only be used for a short period of time in training if you need it at all. For us, 98% of dogs do not need a prong collar in the way that we train. However, there are 2% where it is a little bit useful to use for a small period of time. Some risks that you run of running a prong collar on your dog for extended periods of time are that you can irritate the skin if you keep it on too long. So a good practice for the prong collar, put the prong collar on when you're starting your training session, take the prong collar off when you're ending your training session. People that leave their prong collars on all day and night, these are the types of situations that are setting the dog up for major skin irritation, which we do want to avoid, all right? And if you follow those principles, you can get great success with the prong collar. Again, it can also be used for specialty training to sharpen up some things, but follow those principles, get the success you need, and then move on from there with your training progression. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you guys next time.